So we saw your video about Doc Rivers, and I want to get some things out there. This is my hot take of the week. Just my hot take of the week. I think that people are being too critical of Doc Rivers. I also think that people are being too critical on coaching in general. Partly because people don't know anything about coaching when it comes to NBA basketball. I'm not gonna act like I'm a supreme genius in it either, but people just don't know what they're talking about. So, outside of this videoed format, Coach Nick, why do you think that Doc Rivers deserved to be fired?
Okay. Well, and thanks for having me on, by the way. It's always a Twitter, it still works where you can mention somebody and I see it and I hop into your live for a second to see that you're letting.
That was crazy. You joined a live with like 8 people. I was like, wait, what the fuck? Coach?
So here's the thing about Doc that I think has been whispered around for a while was that, he's a good people manager and he's good, that way. X's and O's aren't really the strongest point of his resume. And I think what always resonated with me was the meltdowns, the consistent way that his teams would just falter in really high pressure situations compared to a lot of other coaches who are probably considered in the same realm as him. And so I'd always kind of wanted to do a video like this to kind of explain it. But I totally get it because what I was going back and forth with this thinking everyone, and I'll show you the text for the other people I know saying, people are going to yell at me just like you were saying, these are the players' problems. It's their fault. Why is it the coach's fault if he throws the ball away on the court? And so that is a legitimate thing. But, the context of Doc was like, he got fired in Orlando. I know that roster construction was not really good at all. But it sounded like there was a lot of disarray there. He was about to be fired in Boston. Like somehow, some way he hung on just long enough where they can do the KG and the Ray Allen trade and they win a title, but like he was out like that wasn't going to happen. And it kind of in a weird way, like, Budenholzer was, 1 inch from being fired if KD's foot was behind the line in Game 7 against Brooklyn. He wins, and then all of a sudden, oh my God! But all the issues that were surrounding him when he's about to get fired were still there. Now, certainly with the Clippers, the meltdowns were epic across the entire landscape. I probably could have done a half an hour just of those games. So that was what I resonated with, and I know I'm talking a lot, but I think that the point I wanted to make was that I always felt like the way he was on the sidelines and the constant yelling at the referees, and it just seemed like it would be so distracting to his team. And you can't argue with the results. They were distracting. The players would get distracted. They'd get discombobulated. They get dysregulated. Body language, all the things that we study for coaching now were all on display, even from, watching the TV feed. And in my mind, for whether it's right or not, or accurate or not, in my mind, those things directly contribute, especially when you're talking about like the Game 7s that I've focused on.
Let me ask you this, just in general, not on Doc Rivers. When do you think that it's a player's fault versus a coach's fault? Like what do you look at when you're watching a game, reviewing tape that makes you say, oh, this is clearly coaching versus, oh, this player is just an idiot?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I know coaches who, certainly feel like they're throwing their hands up. We told them a million times, not to do that, for instance. Sometimes if you pull apart certain mistakes and you kind of realize there might be a conceptual problem with like the play itself, and you're like, well, what was this? Why were they even doing that? And so where I get into the coaches thing is when there is a consistent pattern of trouble where like, why aren't you getting through to the player? Why are you throwing your hands up and saying, well, he's just dumb, or he keeps making that same mistake? At some point, I would think that the coach needs to be the person who can step in, have some sort of impact on that player. I know the NBA is different because they don't have practices like we do at college or high school. But at some point, when his job's on the line, they got to figure out a way. It's like the Jordan Poole thing. Jordan Poole, like whose fault was that he was a broken player in the playoffs and could not perform and couldn't make a pass barely to a teammate. It's a good debate. It's an interesting question. And at some point, you got to wonder if all the extra stuff that the coach would be doing on the sidelines is just contributing needlessly to that, especially in those pressure moments of like a Game 7 or a Game 6 elimination game.
Do you think Jordan Poole's issues were coaching, or do you think Draymond really punching him in the face affected him for real?
Oh, I think both. I think for sure. What's so weird about the Warriors is that, it happened to Harrison Barnes, right? Harrison Barnes missed like a couple of threes in one finals game, and then like the whole atmosphere turned on him in a second, and then he could feel it. You could tell, and like everything just went downhill so quickly. And it seems like the same thing happened with Poole because he was doing fine during the regular season, but something happened, right? A turnover or a play, whatever, early in the playoffs. I don't know what it was, but you could just tell he couldn't regulate anymore. And nobody else could help him regulate, which is a big part of coaching, I think, these days, because we understand the value of the mental aspect of the game. And you got to be able to be in tune with that. Like, for instance, I'm kind of convinced. I got to find out. Hopefully I can directly. I'm almost to the point now where with the Miami Heat, when you watch them turn their aggression and their up on defense for like those 5-minute stretches where like in the third quarter we saw, I think that maybe Spoelstra has conditioned them to do that. I honestly feel like we're getting to the point now where you can use, trigger words or keywords to get an emotional response and actually sick your players on these players and just go crazy for 5 minutes with the kind of energy that the coaches are always railing and screaming about. The point being that we're getting somewhere, I think, eventually in the modern game where we understand how important the mental aspect of it is. And if you're not with that and you're still stuck in the past and doing the same kind of coaching communication methods, I think you're going to be, you're not going to make it.
Ooh, that could be that. I could see that even be an issue for Doc. Maybe he's just too old to be coaching. Popovich as well. Let's get him out of there. But I think one of my last questions for now, at least, is who are some other coaches that you're looking at in the league who I just quite frankly need to, how do I say this without being too mean? I want to say take a step back, but really who don't need to have jobs. Because another problem that I have is that you fire a Doc Rivers, you fire a Coach Bud, you fire a Monty Williams just to include in your circle of names, for the Bucks. Oh, top of our list, Doc Rivers. Is that a solve for this problem, or do we need to talk to Giannis, or like what's the disconnect here? I know I asked you a bunch of stuff, but
yeah. Well, I part of me was thinking that as you're asking the question, maybe there was a whole era of the NBA where they just recycled the same coaches over and over again, right? So I think maybe we're talking about that to some degree. They have they look like the part, they have experience. Like if I were a head coach in the NBA, I would fight to the death to never have as an assistant a former head coach.
Yeah.
Because
I agree.
they're going to be like, we don't need it. It's not working well. Bring that guy's already done it. We'll bring him in. And that happens across every level. So that's one part of it. But I got to tell you, like, I'm a little bit older. And so I've actually coached in the Stone Age, the caveman coaching. And I've also sort of had an awakening in a way where I've been more than willing to get out of the box and see the game the way we are now seeing it now in the modern game with different techniques. And I've spent a lot of time on Twitter trying to help coaches understand that there's a whole other world out there that is beyond what you learned that was solidified in 1994, from 100 years before that. So I do feel like there is a certain age of coach, and it also could be related to the fact that they had played in the league as well, that does not resonate anymore, but it hasn't resonated for a long time. Doc was the guy who was like, a player's coach, right? He was a player. And, he can get along with players. He understands them. Well, at some point you get to an age where you do not understand and you do not have that kind of connection anymore because they're so much younger than you. And, like the Ben Simmons thing I can point to. Remember when he went to practice finally in Philadelphia after all that long layoff, but he wasn't really participating in the drills. Remember that?
That was after he told him that he's not the point guard of the
had his phone in his pocket and everything.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, that I put in the video too. I mean, it's like what he said at the end of the game. He shouldn't have taken the question. He shouldn't, whatever it's raw at the moment right after the games. But yeah, like that's another example of that where, there's some old school mentality doesn't recognize that like the players are going to hear what you said, and there's going to be some internalization of what you said. And so when he comes back the next year and he's really upset about the whole thing, what does Doc do? He does what coaches had been doing for 100 years before that, which is, I'm going to make him do this one drill. And I know he doesn't want to be here. I know he's not going to do it really well. And so I'm now going to detonate all over the guy in front of everybody in the practice and then kick him out, because that's what that was done to me. That's what was done to my coach when I was in high school, whatever. So, but again, what is the goal there? Is the goal to figure out how to get Ben Simmons back on the court performing as well as he possibly can? Well, if that's the case, then trying to embarrass him by throwing him out in a drill and then kicking him out because you knew that was going to happen, that ain't going to get you that goal. And so, and by the way, that's a good thing I probably should have brought up in the damn video, but it's not even like Doc's fault per se. It is exactly just how it had been done. He's been doing it the way we've been doing it for 100 years. And that's the problem, is we need to be able to have enough of an intervention to understand that that is not optimal.
So it's not Doc's fault. It's the organization for bringing Doc Rivers in and thinking he'll have a different philosophy. It's not Doc's fault. I've been right this whole time.
Well, I don't know.
That wasn't the pushback. Look at Damo. Look at Damo. I seen the stream. We seen the stream, bro.
Yeah, I don't
that
know.
wasn't the pushback, bro.
What's the context of y'all debate? By the way,
it was you folding like a lemon.
No. Go ahead. What are you gonna say, Coach? Who are you gonna say? It's not Doc's fault.
The Doc going to Philly was always really weird, right? He gets fired, and was it 2 days later or a day later, he ran to Philly and they hired him. That was all so quick. I have a feeling Doc did that because he was afraid, at his age, even though he's not even that old. But he might have been afraid, I got to get a job right away, or else I might not get another one. He might have felt that way. I don't know. But that all happened so quickly to me. It was startling. Maybe I'm wrong in remembering it wrong, but that's how it was. And that was just surprising to me that all happened that way. Listen, do I know some things about the team behind the scenes? Yeah. And does it sound great? No. It sounds like it was, not very well organized and not a lot of, institutional control, I suppose would be the word. So,
it seems like, to me personally, from outside in, when they got Daryl Morey, it was time after time they were slowly building towards revamping the Rockets, but this time having Joel Embiid. I don't know if it's some mentality that if it was Dwight Howard, but Dwight Howard was actually really good. Maybe that's what they believe. I don't know, but that's always the vibe I've gotten from Philly ever since they've realized that their process really was over. But I don't know what's going on with nowadays with y'all debate. So I'm sorry if I'm intervening.
No. Revamping it for what? Because these are rumors, speculations, all that stuff. James Harden was a big push in getting Doc Rivers fired.
Allegedly, correct. Yeah.
And I believe this is his plot and plan to get Mike D'Antoni back in that chair so he can be who he wants to be, have some, resemblance of some Houston offense. And this is a nod to the dysfunction of the organization. Hence, it not being Doc's fault. We just have a dysfunctional organization.
Okay.
I want to ask Omar and Coach this. I'm going to start with Coach. Out of the accountability pie chart for the Philadelphia 76ers, between the management, the coaching, and the players, how would you split up those three?
Blame?
Yeah, the blame, essentially.
Management, coaching. By the way, I heard this a podcast somebody sent over to me that lit the heck out of the entire organization up, and it was made some really good points. This guy's an NFL guy, but I guess he's a Philly fan. I don't know if you guys know. I'll look it up. But anyway, the point being that I hadn't really even. It's a good question. I to process that, I would have to say, obviously the players deserve a lot of the credit for success, for sure, and probably most of the credit, especially because, again, you have to remember, in the NBA, you're not having a 2-hour practice, and you're not going to drill, offense for an hour and then go over defensive rotations, and get sweaty. They don't do that anymore. But again, I would say the players get, and then we're talking about specifically Philly, right?
Yeah, Philly, just Philly.
So I would have to say that the players get 40%. I would give Doc 40%, and then probably the culture 20. I don't know.
This series.
Okay. Let's stop there. That's fine. Yeah. Omar, you go ahead and do yours.
And I'm assuming you mean his entire tenure in Philadelphia.
Sure.
I'm not
Yeah.
gonna lie.
Sure. Don't say nothing nasty. Man.
I'm giving the organization like good 50. I'm giving the organization like maybe even 60. I might want to bump it up to 60, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Some offensive
And
players,
this is
man. I ain't
Daryl.
gonna lie
This is
to you.
more you're talking about, right? So like you don't like the way they treat him like assets, and they're not like they don't have a culture like other teams have set up.
Well,
is that the idea?
this is because Daryl Morey just got there last year?
No, 2020.
I think
2019,
he hired
2020.
You
Yeah,
think-
yeah. Daryl Morey and Doc joined the same time. Elton,
Right, okay,
I want
okay.
to say, and Brett Brown left. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So 60, yeah, and it's an asset thing. Cool, fine. Plus, I feel like they're coming in trying to convince them to do something different. However they may go about that. And
So
Philly is
60.
still trying to fight with some old regime. Hence,
Mhm.
Joel Embiid, I like to be at the top of the key. But that's okay, cool.
So whose fault is it that he's playing that way and not the way you think he should be
That's
playing?
I think that's
gonna
Joel.
say.
I think that's Joel.
Okay.
I personally, for me personally, I think that is more Joel, and then ownership trickling it down to management saying, hey, we spent X amount of dollars on this guy, and he is the last piece of this thing that we told our fans, season ticket holders, would work. He is the last remaining thing that we're holding on from this process, and we need to make sure that he's happy. This is a guy who in the offseason, and I know it's just looks, I see him with Jason Tatum a lot doing perimeter stuff. I think he doesn't like to bang down there a lot because he knows, like, my knees and stuff like that. So cool. But he likes to be he thinks he's Jason Tatum. But he's really,
7'1" body.
he's really 7'1" and he needs to be down there banging. I think that they're playing into Joel Embiid way more than like anything else, to be honest.
Mhm.
You know what's funny is Brett Brown had the same problem with like Ben Simmons, right? He kept going to the dunker spot, and that's not what they're telling him. They know that's not the offense they're designing, and that's what shouldn't be there. It's, by the way, that's a weird spot. Like Aaron Gordon did it, the other night for Denver. It's a spot where I guess you can go to hide if you don't really know what and how you want to do that. You can go over there and just sort of hang out. And it never made sense. How come Brett Brown is not, creating the offense that they need for him to be better? And I think that you're right. I mean, there's no question Embiid has a lot of control in that way that like LeBron has control over the organization that he's been on. And that's tough because listen, you throw the ball to him at the free throw line and he nails that jumper all the time, right? He can get by you and do the drives. I mean, like, is that any worse than like throwing him down low on the block and having him do some stuff and maybe get doubled, which he doesn't handle that well, right? I don't think he passes that well out of double teams.
No, not really.
Probably doesn't want. That's maybe the reason why he doesn't want to do it. So I would love to know exactly what that whole thing is, but it doesn't sound like there's been a lot of control in the locker room. It doesn't sound like Doc had even tried. Or maybe he did and just gave up at whatever point, where there isn't a lot of that voice of a coach in a traditional way being able to shape that. So I guess, right. So your point then it's the players.
So then the other, if we're going to put it at 50, I'm putting the other, I don't want to leave 10% for Doc. 10% is kind of crazy. All right, 50, 20, 20% Doc Rivers. And then like the other 30 is like players doing what they want to do, not being happy in the situation.
This is interesting.
And it's because,
I'm gonna let
Damo,
go, quiet.
before you go, I want to raise this.
I just got one more question before Damo goes.
This specific point. I'm looking at this play right here. It was a play that you highlighted. I'm a Hawks fan. John Collins is not a great defender. He should not be able to
Give him a little. He was this series. Oh wait, was it this series? This series he was actually, or no? What was the series I'm thinking about?
It wasn't this series because Tobias was giving him problems in this series as well.
Crap. All right, go ahead. This is the conference finals, right? This is the one they got the conference final.
Yeah, this is the one that gets to the conference finals.
Game
I thought he did well, but okay, go ahead.
I see a play develop. Cool. We got some action. Cool. Joel already just reverts to getting at the top. That's fine. He's Jason Tatum, 7'1", big guy.
Ain't that the play though?
That's a play. What I don't understand is the Tobias Harris, and it could be him going to get a rebound, cutting towards the basket when we already know Ben Simmons is going to be in this spot because there's nothing else for him to do. After he's gotten done with the ball, there's nothing else for him to do. Right, he's in this spot. So when Joel goes to turn, he's turning into the man that Tobias Harris brought down there. Now, if Clint Capella contributed to the miss is up for discussion. But there's another play. Hold on. And mind you, the body language we're not talking about the body language. I'm glad that you brought that up as well. The body language is big in this conversation. But I think it's this play. I believe it's this play right here. Got two screens going for Joel Embiid to come off like he's Klay Thompson. This is crazy. It's the most insane thing in the world. We have Tobias Harris, who has John Collins on him. I think he's a competent three-point shooter. They've got Ben Simmons off the court. It should be pretty free down low for him to do what he needs to do. He has Danilo on him. Now, he does lose the ball. I would think that some of that has to do with all of a sudden John Collins is in his face because Tobias Harris. Listen, I think Tobias Harris
that's
bringing his man. Tobias bringing his man down there, put a little fear in his heart. Now, should Joel have some fear in his heart? No. But you lose that ball because Tobias, for whatever reason, brought his man down there.
I'm gonna say those two plays are near the end of the game.
Though.
I think those two plays at the end of the game, and both times you would think for a split second, if you're Tobias Harris, granted he might have messed up twice, that he could shoot the ball, especially that one at the top key. Like he literally head faked it. So maybe Tobias thought he was going up twice, because I sincerely doubt that the players on the court had a 4 and the other play a 5 baseline play where everyone is quite literally horizontal on the baseline. I don't think that was design. I think they were crashing, but that's just my opinion.
That's it. I mean, listen, those are all fabulous points. And again, by the time you get to a game 7 of the second round of the playoffs, you would think that the influence of the coach would be such that those mistakes wouldn't be made. They know how to read. They know spacing. They understand that. And yet, like, it kept happening. So, I mean, this isn't – I don't know if this is an argument that – I'm not going to try and convince you. I don't know if we're going to win an argument on this one. I think there's just a lot of variables here. But I do think that, and I left out a couple of these game 7s. You kept looking at them and you kept seeing these meltdowns and you kept seeing bad spacing and bad movement and horrible turnovers that shouldn't be happening because they can spin. At some point you got to the buck stops somewhere, right? And if it's not the coach after enough times, and Doc Rivers has so many game 7 losses. My buddy Ben is here. He's walking in. He's actually a basketball coach too. I'm going to let him in. Maybe he'll jump on with us if you don't mind.
Bring him in.
Bring him in.
Shout out to Ben.
Yo, Damo. Okay, so while he does that,
look at Dom.
Okay, so I'm pretty caught up. I'll be brief. So basically, Omar's basically like, it's not all Doc's fault. Damo, I assume you're like, what are you talking about? It's the players, and so is your neutral, I assume? Or are you
pretty neutral. Pretty neutral. Okay. Yeah.
I sat for a whole hour watching Omar break down a 20-minute video from Coach Nick, by the way. I don't know how you stretch a 19-minute video into 56 minutes, Omar. I watched him stretch a 19-minute video to 56 minutes, and not once in this video did I hear him say anything about, yeah, man, you got to look at the front office and the organization for why these things is going on. All I heard was, nah, you can't blame – how you going to blame Doc for James Harden tripping? Nah, how you gonna blame Doc for Ricky Davis missing a layup?
Dom, 80% of it was, is this Doc's fault? Is this Doc? And then when Coach Nick entered the building, I ain't gonna lie, the bubble, this is a lot of Doc. This is a lot of Doc.
I will maintain, because if I remember correctly, hey Ben, if I remember correctly, Montrez was getting washed, and I was a Montrez guy. Montrez was just he did not belong in the NBA at that point. So Doc
can always do that. The guy who played well one game against him, and he makes sure to trade for him.
Didn't he do someone like Paul Reed too, or something like that?
I had a whole interview with a beat writer for like 5 or it was like 10 minutes long, and I just cut it because the whole damn video was so long. But that was also where we got into a lot of that stuff too. There is a lot of the technical coaching stuff that really was the problem. Like, Montrezl Harrell for sure. By why was he ever in game 7? By game 2, you would have known he can't get on the floor. Paul Reed is a guy this year who was doing well. They were kind of grooming him to be in that role. And then, they completely go away from him and they have nothing to offer when Embiid goes to the bench. So, you're right. Like I could have gotten in the weeds on that too, and made probably a better argument, it sounds like, than I did on the rest of it.
okay, so when Montrez, and see, this is front office. I think, if I'm not mistaken, this may have been the year when Montrez was on the team. That's when Doc was also doing double duty.
Yeah.
And so that's a front office issue. We've got to lay off Doc. We have
There's no way you sat there and watched Doc coach the Magic and you sit there, oh man, Trace McGrady's a bad playmaker. I wonder why he's in a situation to make a playmaking play when we need it. There's no way you watch Doc coach the Magic and you see one guy helping off when he doesn't need the help off, and you see the same Doc coach the Celtics and a player does the same thing. And the same Doc coaches the Clippers and you see a player do the same thing on defense. And the same Doc is coaching 2 iterations of the Sixers, and then on the defensive end, they're making the same mistakes they've been making for over a decade. And you're going to sit here and tell me, nah, it's the front office and the players in every situation. Like, no, Doc is clearly making mistakes. Doc is clearly having his faults, and it's been evident for as long as we've been alive at this point. It's looking like I don't understand. As long as Eli's been alive, I'm sorry. I don't understand how we're even having. Like, I don't even understand how you're having this stance on. Oh man, Ricky Davis is on the court, man. How we blaming Doc? Like,
okay.
no,
So this is my assumption, and maybe both coaches can clear this up. I am under the assumption, because we talked about that finals thing where KG messed up. I'm under the assumption that when we have veteran players definitely need less coaching. And so some of these mistakes, some of these mishaps, some of these things are just veteran players folding under pressure, making, mistakes, whatever the case may be. Because I didn't think that Doc needed to tell KG, hey, don't stand in no man's land. At least pick somebody up. Or Rondo, you don't need to be in a situation where you're trying to force your way to guard Pau Gasol. Get over to Derek Fisher, buddy. You're gonna be out of the way. But that's and I think Doc gets teams with a lot of veterans. He has smart point guards on his team. I think that's like a staple of his more recent team. But so I thought that was, not a coaching issue. It's just, hey, veteran players either are going to step up when they need to, or they're going to fall. And it's because they don't need as much coaching. That could be a bad judgment call by me, though.
But if you look at James Harden's shots in Game 7, they were all makeable shots. Those are all good shots for Harden. He didn't make them. So how much of that is on Harden? How much of that is on Doc?
100% on Harden.
Okay. No, well, here's the thing. In the modern game, we understand how we rely on the 3-point shot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we also understand now how important the mental aspect is to shooting the basketball, right? And that's why I hope we're gonna go away from the Izzos and all those kind of coaches, the Bobby Knight style, because when you treat your play, and Ben can really attest to this, when you treat your players that way in a game, we know chemically how the brain reacts to anger and disgust. And some players, and I could do this, was like, oh, I need that kind of coaching, or I can thrive in that kind of coaching. But when we're talking about shooting and the need to be rhythmic and relaxed to be able to make a three, you can't shoot harder. You could see it in the Sixers. They weren't going to make. They went 3 for 21 or whatever in that second half. Once it started to fall apart, and that would have been where you could take a timeout or do something to be able to help your team mentally recover and get back to equilibrium, because it was still a close game. That was the thing. So I could feel it through the TV. If you want to call it, kumbaya and new age stuff or whatever. All I can tell you is that when you get into a positive frame of mind, and we're talking about shooting specifically, it is so powerful how much better you can be, especially when you're talking about distance from 25 feet away, especially when the game starts to slip out of your hands and you need to start making threes. Look at this. I can't believe this reaction. That is a huge thing, and that's why Duval's, part of the thing we see now in the modern game is we don't see these kind of blowouts. It used to be back in the day when I was younger, a home team would go on a run in the end of the second quarter, and that was it. The blowout was on, and the team would just fold, right? Now with the 3-point shot, we don't see that as much. We have wild runs to keep teams stay in the games, but Doc's teams don't, and they still do the old.
That's true. That's true. I'm sorry.
Let me say this.
Let me watch the blowouts, and you know what I mean. They never compete. They can't stay with it hard enough. Look at the freaking Lakers. If you don't, they have to be buried 60 under before they're going to lose. They will stay in it and they will stick to it. until the very bitter end because they are tough like that, and that's what Darvin Ham can do for you. That's for you.
I was just about to ask you that. So you think that is a plus for Darvin Ham, or is that like, hey, we have LeBron James on our team, so we're gonna be geared up?
No, it's a plus for Darvin Ham. He
Yeah,
makes an
that's
adjustment.
him. That's him. But I'm gonna tell
Ham
you,
will make an adjustment, whether it's late, whether it's missed, whether it's
Look at Omar.
2 games too late, a series, regardless.
I'll talk next
He'll
Omar, 'cause
make
I
an
know what you're
adjustment.
thinking.
He will make an adjustment. Now, I will say, I've been pro Darvin Ham's a terrorist because he lacks the ability to constantly make adjustments, or he'll lack the knowledge to have certain lineups in when we're supposed to have them in. But compared to Doc Rivers, yeah, Darvin Ham is a savant of basketball when it comes to making adjustments.
Well, we're going to find out in about 20 minutes because
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, we are. I can't. Oh God, I can't handle that.
right? He kept the starting line that looked so good against the Warriors and didn't really say, well, how would that match? I don't know if he did or not. I think he wanted continuity, but there's no way he could. You should have been able to see that. You're going to putting Austin Reeves on MPJ was going to be what we saw. And then he kept it there. The third quarter they started. So Darvin Ham has some accountability here. He better come tonight with a better game plan because that could have cost him the game. Why they started the same 5 in the third quarter, I have no idea. And by the way, Doc does the same thing too. I'm looking at what video am I doing right now? Whatever video I'm doing right now, the same idea. They didn't. It was Nzula. Didn't make an adjustment of this personnel either in that third quarter when they got destroyed. And why is Missoula funny? Did I say it wrong?
I'm
Oh,
a
no,
Celtics
this-
fan.
Nah,
I'm a
he's a
Celtics
Celtics
fan.
fan. He's a Celtics fan.
Yeah.
He's hurting right now. After
I'm
that,
hurting a little bit.
Can I ask? And this is for everybody. Wouldn't it make sense to think after? And I want to bring it back to the plays that you brought up, Omar, that you referenced against the Hawks. Wouldn't it make sense to think that if Tobias Harris is a competent shooter, we know he's a competent shooter. You have one play where you have a guy like Clint Capella, who's seen as the rim protector for the Hawks. If he's on you, realistically, it will make sense to pull him out, step away, ready for a 3. Correct. But if you have a guy like that who decides on 2 individual plays, and that's just those 2 plays, who knows how many times it happened all game, I'm going to dive directly to the basket without my hands up expecting a pass to get in the same position to get a rebound. Wouldn't that scream to you maybe that is coming from the sideline, and that's a game plan, that's a scheme, that is a coaching suggestion that we want to gang rebound, we want to attack the boards or whatever it is? Wouldn't that make sense?
Does anybody and again, maybe I just have way too much faith in these players and their ability to know basketball. Right. Tobias
Clearly
Harris.
not. Sorry.
Tobias Harris throws it in, to Joel Embiid, and Danilo Gallinari's got him locked up real good.
Mm-hmm.
If Tobias Harris can't understand not to dive right underneath the basket, Tobias Harris doesn't need to be in the NBA. And I felt the same way when that same stretch that Coach Nick was talking about, where they just start jacking up threes in Game 7 the other night. I'm saying to myself, because I watched that and I was like, yo, these are all early shot clock. These are all extremely early shot clock when they're jacking threes. James Harden, if you can't stop passing the ball to these people so they take threes, you don't deserve to be in the NBA, or you're trying to get Mike D'Antoni hired.
I don't think he played a Game 7 trying to get D'Antoni hired. I'm gonna just throw that out there. I don't.
There's
I
no
don't,
proof that he didn't stage.
Well, there is proof that a lot of people had a narrative about Harden, and Harden gambling said narrative for a past his prime run with D'Antoni is crazy. So I don't think he did that.
He likes to be comfortable, Sage. He likes to be really comfortable.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I'm into.
It's going to be a past his prime James Harden till his prime James Harden again next year. So
okay.